It is 7:01 and we are at quorum. So we're going to move forward regardless. Yes, we're here. We're doing this. Quick note before we start. Over the last few times when we've met, sometimes we have a little bit of chatter with the microphones off. Sometimes it's joking. Sometimes it's from the audience. We always want to hear anybody who's talking, but if it's not into the mic, the people at home can't hear it. And so we want to be really, really careful to either step up to the mic there or pull our mics forward at the tables while we're talking. Okay? Otherwise, we do not have full public access to what happened. Okay, let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we have 3 excused absences. That is Heather Robitaille, Shane Albuquerque, and Lee French. Okay, do we have any public participation this evening? Nobody who wants to do a double hat, stand up as a public member? There we go, Matt. Okay, thank you. We'll close public participation. Now, I wanted to note and make sure that the files that were sent out by email were received by those on the committee. We had some supporting materials that were provided, thank you, Matt, that are budget materials that different members of the committee requested. It included some cross-year comparisons, year-to-date data, Excel version of some of it, and things of that sort. I think that closes all of the open requests, but if there are other things that you had in mind, feel free to bring it forward, and we will see what we can do. Are there any requests or ideas for changes to the agenda as it currently is presented? Anything people would like to add or change? Okay, hearing nothing, let's move on forward. We have 2 presentations tonight. One is the elementary schools together, and the other is the upper elementary. Thank you very much for being here and for coming. If those represent the elementary schools would come first, that would be wonderful. Thank you. If you can introduce yourselves.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us to discuss the 24-25 school budget for Mastercola Elementary School, Thorntons Ferry Elementary School, and James Mastercola Elementary School. I'm Michelle Romaine, principal of MES, and here with me are Assistant Principal Brooke Ross from Thorntons Ferry, Principal Bonnie Panchode from Reeds Ferry, Laura Livy, Assistant Principal from Reeds Ferry, Kathleen Ortega, Assistant Principal at MES, and due to family situation, Julie DeLuca, Principal of Thorntons Ferry, is not able to join us today. Keep going, or you want to go?
Would you like, yes, you can keep going.
Okay.
Would you prefer, if you want to have, I think that an introduction is wonderful from you.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Great. Okay. So the elementary budgets for the 24-25 school year continue to reflect the priorities established by the Merrimack School District and the Merrimack School Board. We continue to invest in our co-curricular activities and academic disciplines, including a new reading program to further align us with the science of reading. We continue to ensure that experiences across the 3 elementary schools as well as the upper elementary school are equitable. As a team, the elementary schools met with our budget liaisons, Lee French, Jennifer McCormick, and Gina Groff. And we are happy to turn it over to them at this point to share their thoughts, or we can take questions. It's up to you.
Let's hear from the committee, from the liaison group. Yes, if you wouldn't mind taking the floor with that.
Hello, good to see you again. Thank you for taking the time to meet with us to go through all of our questions. We presented ahead of time, probably 3 or 4 pages of inquiries about line items on the budget. So we do appreciate you going through them with us. I do think that we had a better understanding of the spending as after going through it in detail with you. And I think most of our questions were answered in terms of the areas where we saw spikes and the areas where we had concerns about maybe some of the unusual spending numbers. Could you speak a little bit about the enrollment numbers? Because I know that that was something that came up in our conversation that wasn't a part of our packet here, and so it might be good context to share with the rest of the committee.
We can speak to how, like, what the enrollment numbers are and where they come from. So each year, obviously, we have our first through fourth graders, or in preparing for the next year, our first through third graders. We have the students that are currently in our buildings. And there's usually some fluctuation with those, but those are pretty steady. What's always the unknown is our kindergarten numbers. And so the district does a variety of things, and this is definitely a Matt Chevenel question as to how he works his magic behind the scenes, but it's the kindergarten numbers that's always unknown. And we get numbers across the district at times, but it doesn't necessarily translate into particular grade levels or particular schools. So it's always really hard to determine the number of students coming into kindergarten. For example, we have between 70 and 80 kids per grade level at MES. This year, our kindergarten class is 52 students. So it's hard to, to get that kindergarten number. Do you want to add?
And on the on the flip side, we were projected to have 75 kindergarteners, and we have 120. So it's the projection is.
Speak of the devil.
Oh, you talking to me?
I'd like to ask.
Now Matt's gonna.
Okay. Yeah, the enrollment projections we do, I've been doing these from a formula that Jim O'Neill gave me 24 years ago. So I took over the torch, and it's based on grade projections. But like Bonnie just said, when that kindergarten class came in, I went, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Did you take the ones out that are going to first grade? Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" So sometimes you just have no clue what's going. And even the amount of construction in the area and everything like that really didn't support all those kindergarten kids. We think as a whole we're going to be well staffed, but if you look at I don't know, Naomi, I emailed you those, right?
Yes, we disseminated that.
All right, good. So you look at it on the whole, I think we have enough staff, but maybe first grade, we'll shift one from third grade to first grade. It all depends, so it's a big pool, but that's hardest to predict is kindergarten, first grade, how they're going to transfer over. Usually from kindergarten to first grade, there's an increase in enrollments, but we'll see what happens. I don't know what Bonnie's kindergarten's going to be next year, but we gave it a go, so we'll see. Oh, the boss is here, so I got to go sit down now.
Do you have a sense, you may not, this is out of curiosity, of where they are coming from? Do you have a way of knowing, are they a cluster from a particular space, or?
So we actually looked at all of our new enrollments and the street, and I sent it to Matt, and it's not a cluster from any particular area. It's spread throughout our particular area in Merrimack. Now there is new construction that's going on in every part of Merrimack, so that plays into it, but it wasn't one particular area that we could pinpoint. But there's a lot of little children. Cute as buttons.
I'll just take a moment as well to highlight that one of the largest spending items in the elementary school budget relates to the new reading program that's being put in place, which I think is an amazing change for the district. I think it's really going to help a lot of the kids who are struggling, who struggled through COVID and struggled through the last set of reading materials. You'll see in the budget, it's up, to the tune of 80,000 plus 60,000 plus 70,000, whatever that is. Those numbers really stood out to me like, whoa, what are we spending money on here? But I think the investment is well worth it because it's going to set our students up for success, not only in reading, but in all of their other subjects. the research shows that there's a collaborative or a congruent relationship between reading and other background knowledge from other subjects. So to see the investment in this program and to see the investment in the materials is amazing. Unfortunately, it's the first year of a 4 to 5 year investment in the curriculum. And so from our meeting, I learned that sometimes we pay for that curriculum along the way a little bit each year. Sometimes we pay for it up front. And so it sounds like this particular set we are paying up front for, but it will be well worth it for the students in the long run.
Hello, thanks for joining. Sorry I was late again. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for your collaboration. It's wonderful to see the 3 elementary schools come together. You've always had such a great partnership. You work so well together. You really mesh nicely, and it's obvious that you care so much for the little ones that you have in your school. So again, thank you. Obviously, elementary school is near and dear to my heart, but JMU's, I'm coming for you next year. I agree with what Jennifer said. A lot of thought went into this budget, and it's nice to see that everybody's on the same page. Again, a lot of the expenses were for Wit and Wisdom, which was the reading program that Jennifer was describing, which is absolutely wonderful. We need to invest resources. We need to invest in programs. We need to invest in our children because Amy, I still remember this from last year, where right now in the elementary school where they're learning to read, but we really need to prepare them because as soon as they get up into the higher grades like JMU's, they're reading to learn. So we really need to make sure that they have a very strong foundation. And I think we're doing just that. And, the other area that I really liked the increase in, and I know that this was done last year, is in the extracurricular programs, extra, whatever, that you're doing and offering by the schools. I know the first session just started up. Fortunately, we weren't able to take advantage of it this year because we're at Pat's Peak skiing, but wonderful, wonderful use of resources. The kids love it right after school, so it's a really nice transition. And I think sometimes kids struggle with that transition from school right to home. So really lovely program that you're offering, fully support what you're doing there. And yeah, I mean, you answered all of our questions beautifully. I wasn't there to see your faces when I sent over the 4-page spreadsheet, so I'm not sure what you thought, but I mean, so thorough, and I really appreciate all your collaboration. It's been wonderful to see how you work together, and I know it's really snowy, so thanks for coming out, and hopefully we can get you on your way as soon as we can to safely home, because I know you're not as all local as we are, so thank you.
Amy, did you want to? Yes.
Would it be okay if I just added a little bit to what Jennifer was speaking to? The first year of Wit and Wisdom, there is a fairly large financial investment, and that is to purchase the core texts that go along with each one of the modules in each grade level. And as you've noted, and it seems like both of you have done your homework, this is the next step in our shift from balanced literacy to structured literacy, is to have a knowledge building curriculum. After next year, that cost will go from about $250, $275 all in for the core text to about $10,000 per building that'll be implementing it. So it's about $50,000. And that will be to replace the workbooks and the digital licenses and other things that go along with the program. Now, when we add classrooms, just like we have done, you'll see requests in the budget for additional foundations kits or geodes kits, which are the decodable readers that go along with our phonics instruction. But I don't want the community or other folks to think that this will be a reoccurring cost. It is the initial investment. And of course, we will continue to offer high quality PD when we need to, but the core texts there's a lot upfront, but that cost does not continue year after year.
While you're at the mic, if you don't mind, I'll keep you there for one more second, if you're willing. You mentioned balanced versus structured, and I think that folks who are watching and perhaps some of the people at the table may not be aware of the shifts and improvements and advances we've made at the national level in terms of making choices between these curriculums, and may need to understand that this isn't us just deciding on something new, but that it's part of something more significant. I wonder if you could give that some context.
Sure. And I'm happy to have both all of the folks that are here that have a lot of literacy experience as well. What we're looking at on a national level is a shift from an approach to teaching that is not necessarily rooted in the explicit teaching of the sound symbol relationship. So you're looking at using primarily a cueing system to be able to teach kids to read. And there is a lot of there's a lot of research that has come out, back in the 90s and currently. And as you know, there's a lot of things in education that are cyclical, right? So it is a similar thing, different name, comes back around. But the explicit teaching of phonics is what teaches students to be able to read the words that are in front of them. So what we're really looking at here in Merrimack is, are we teaching word recognition? And so we would do that through decoding and through teaching the skills of decoding and encoding. So those of you at home, that's being able to read the word and then also spell it. And then phonemic awareness, those are some skills that kindergarten, first, second graders learn. And then can you use those words to then derive meaning from the context of a sentence, a paragraph, and then a passage. And that's where the knowledge building curriculum comes in, because we also know that students have to have strong vocabulary. That is cross-curricular, so you'll often see the modules in Wit and Wisdom are rooted in science and social studies, which are very high interest topics for students. So Michelle, Nikki, do you want to add anything else? They were both literacy coordinators here in the district, and I know this is a passion of Dr. Rowe when she did her dissertation. So I have some of that information, and if you want to look up Scarborough's Rope, that's really what we're looking to address, is that best practice of teaching both word recognition and knowledge building. And prior to this, I guess I could just add, I would say, and I haven't been here for very long, but the phonics program that we were using just wasn't at standard. I don't know how else to say it, so we'll just put it out there. Okay. And I certainly don't fault any decision that was made. I really feel like the people that were here made the best decision with the information they had. So we're not here to place blame. What we are here to do is to look at the data and recognize what students need, and then systematically and intentionally let the community know that we need that, and then ask for it in a fiscally responsible way, which is what I think we've done over the last 2 years. Last year, we implemented foundations, and this year we're looking for that next part. We've also shifted our assessments away from we use Fountas and Pinnell. I don't know how familiar you are. We were using that for a long time, and we're no longer using that because now we know that there is a better approach to assessing students and identifying what they need.
Thank you very much. Did I see hands?
Amy, I just want to say, watching you the last couple of years and being at the elementary school level with my kiddos and seeing some of the stuff that you've worked with the teams and the educators and things that you've brought to, you deserve big kudos for that, because you have
Thank you.
definitely brought things in. You've gotten the buy-in from people in the schools. You've asked for their thoughts and inputs, where a lot of you see in other school communities where it's just administration is just throwing things at the teachers and saying, this is what we bought, this is what you need to figure out. And you're not doing that. You're doing that from what I'm seeing, from a collaborative approach, and it's being received really well. And if it's being received really well by the teachers, it's definitely being received very well by the students, because they know that their teachers are engaged in it, so they're engaged in it as well.
I appreciate that. It's definitely been a team effort. The people here at the table and others, the literacy coordinators, they have just were really willing, to engage in that. And it is a huge shift. And people, like you said, they're embracing it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. And if you are a teacher in kindergarten through sixth grade, there have been a lot of changes, and they have handled them with grace and with perseverance. And I'm really thankful to be here in this time and place, and to be able to be with this team to make those changes. So thank you.
Thank you. I just have two more comments, if I could. I think it's also important for the community to know that you've got the three elementary schools, right? And they work collaboratively. Thanks, Gina. Now I can't talk like you. But it's important to note as well that with the three of them, you also have the upper elementary school, right? You've got 4 schools that are working together to make sure that the kiddos are doing well between, up till 6th grade. I can't speak to middle school and high school because I'm not there yet. But it came up in my meeting with the upper elementary school yesterday as well, is they all get together and they all want to make sure that what they're doing at the elementary level will translate over into the upper elementary level and vice versa. Are there things that they're going to need in the upper elementary that need to start in the elementary school? And you need to have that, right? Because you've got 3 schools in Merrimack that all merge into one, right? And that's a lot for 5th graders, right? They've been in the same school for 5 years and they're anxious to get into that next school that they've really only been into once, and how is it going to be different, and the way the things are. And when those things go off without a hitch for a majority of the students, that's fabulous. I mean, my son made that bridge this year, and his big thing was he had choices at lunch. Right? It wasn't, that was his big thing. It wasn't what he was learning or anything else, because it was seamless for him. The way he was being taught at Thornton's is no different than the way he's being taught at the upper elementary. And I think that's important for the community to know as well. And that's why you'll see some of the budgeted items are very much commingled of how those funds are appropriated between the 4 schools, because they're having those conversations. And last thing, I'm sorry, I'll stop talking after. It's important too for the community to understand that extracurricular activity line item. We added that a couple of years ago. This was unbelievable, the reception that's happening. I fortunately have 2 kiddos involved with it at the elementary school level that started today, and it was the best thing since sliced bread, right? It may be 4 weeks, but they see it as they get to do something different. They get to interact with other teachers that they may not necessarily interact with during the day, and they see that, as a big deal. And you get a lot of participation, right? There's a lot of participation. I mean, you ladies know from when you start getting the responses and you're like, okay, but we can only have so many kiddos in one thing, but you're getting flooded with the number of responses. So I don't know how it will work in years to come, but I think it may just be something that ends up getting bigger, and there may be some considerable more funding to it. But I appreciate the teachers that are trying to that want to be involved in it and see this as a great learning opportunity for the kiddos after school. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add on to that. And by the way, I can't say the word, and specific. We can't say that. Michelle and I cannot say that word. Just wanted to add on to that. It seems like with the extracurricular activities, which I already spoke about, we were looking at, and I'm just, highlighting some of the other areas where we saw some increases, and music was one of them. And, what we found is that chorus participation has went up, I think, 60%, at least at Thorntons Ferry, which is wonderful. So it's wonderful to see the kids getting engaged, getting involved, even within school with extracurricular activities. And, when we discussed with you about what the expenses were in with the supplies and the music supplies and things like that, we asked, think about in the future too, what instruments or what, materials do you think you'll need in the future? Because this does seem to be an area that's really expanding. So I think it's good to think about, what you may need in the future, because I know even moving up through the grades in high school, I mean, there's, a big thing about, the music and the drama and the dance. So I think that it's great that it starts at elementary school, and that's an area, I think that you shouldn't be afraid to, fund there if you need it, and because I think it will really enrich the students' lives. Unified arts are something that's really important, as well as, the reading, writing, and math. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is there was an increase in some of the science line items, and that's because all of the schools are updating their the standards to the next generation science standards. And it's more of a mystery science program, so it's really interactive. And as the principals were describing this, it sounded really interesting. So you have more engineering concepts. It's more about performance tasks and what the processes are. I like the example that you gave, not necessarily learning the names of the planets, but what are the planets made of? How are they categorized? So really going above and beyond that surface level learning of science and really going, that layer down or even deeper. So I really like that. Not only are we investing in our reading and writing, but we're investing in our science as well, because I think science is really a core as well. And I think that it's really lovely to see that we are putting more money into this. And, with such an interactive program, you do need more supplies. So, I think that that's reflective of that. And, as far as some of the other supplies and some of the other line items, it's inflation. I mean, inflation is a big one. And basically, Matt gave them all the numbers for the supplies. So if we have any questions, we can ambush Matt during break. But anyways, no, again, thank you very much. And that's all I had.
I'll just touch on one more aspect of the budget that we discussed, which is around outfitting a couple of new classrooms, outfitting the gym to be able to support 2 gym classes happening at the same time. There were a few things around furniture and around dividers for rooms and things like that that are in this budget that we needed to invest in order to best serve the students in the various ways that the classrooms are set up to accommodate, so that we can make sure that we have the proper number of student to teacher ratio, and our students are best set up to learn. So just wanted to throw that in there if anybody sees anything around the furniture or the dividers. We did discuss that, and it does seem like it's a need and a piece that will benefit the students.
So I have two questions. The first is more straightforward, and that is just to double check. I think I know the answer already, but just to make sure, when we have some places where the reading texts drop significantly and then added otherwise, that was just different ways of putting the reading materials where they most belonged in the budget.
Yes, and there are places where materials were ordered last year. So for example, our kindergarten numbers, we thought we would have the extra kindergarten. We don't need to order kindergarten. We sent part of it to Bonnie, but then we can get it back for next year. So some of that is ordering and what we already have, some is sharing, and then some is in different places. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And also, there are consumables. There are texts that can be used year over year. And then there are also consumables are like the workbooks that you give the student, or the worksheets, or different things like that, after 1 year with a student, you have to reinvest in. So that's important to note when you're talking about investing in the curriculum as well.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is a little bit sideways, and that is the supplies that teachers receive for their classrooms. When the budgets come out, this is a small item in the budget itself, but it seems to have a disproportionate effect on how the wider community views the budget. When the budgets tend to come out, or at the beginning of the year, there tends to be a sort of, when teacher requests go home, there tends to be a pushback that I hear, I don't know if others do, where people are saying we have a budget that is this big and the teachers don't have paper towels, or things like that. And so I wanted to kind of bring 2 prongs forward for you to give me your thoughts. The first is, are we funding sufficiently for supplies? And if so, I realize it's a national habit, but could you give me some context on those lists and what they mean?
Sure. So I think for people to know, the way that we do the supply accounts are per pupil. So we've made sure that across the buildings, it's a set dollar amount. And then those supply monies at each school get divided among every teacher, as well as things like paper that everyone uses, any other supplies that really are relative to just the day-to-day management of a school. So a classroom teacher receives probably around between, depending on the year, the number of teachers, between like $200 and $270 to outfit their classroom. Now that's aside from all the supplies that they get for the curriculum, all of those come out of the budget you see. But that's things like if they want to do a certain bulletin board, if they want to read certain books that go out a read aloud, all those things like that come out of the teachers purchase out of there. So the items that typically go on supply items, part of the reason for having the lists is because they do look at things like Clorox wipes, which I know any teacher, if you give them a choice between something for their classroom that directly goes to the kids or a box of wipes, will spend their money on the materials for the students. So things like wipes, paper towels. If you've ever been in an elementary school and seen the paper towels we have, you'll know why those are on the list. So those are the extra things that are not necessarily to run a classroom, but do help and support. The other thing that supply lists do is through the years, parents always are asking, what can we do? Can we help out? Are there things that we can give? So giving some idea of things is another way that parents have often asked about being involved. So it's not only do we do because it's nice to have those supplies, but it's also, I think, a nice way for parents to be involved as well. So if you ask, do we have adequate supplies? Yes, we absolutely have what we need to teach your kids every day.
Thank you.
So I'll just ask, I guess clarifying, because I think one of the comments that you said, Naomi, that resonates with me is the larger community generally gets upset, it seems, at when the supply lists come out. And on those supply lists are things like pencils, crayons, Post-it notes, things that should be covered under supplies. And again, I think to Naomi's point, I think you hit the nail on the head of just making sure that we're funding the basics. So I don't know, the dollar amount that goes in per student, but maybe considering taking off some of those basics, and really just leaving it as if parents, want to help out. It might be more of just those things of, the nice to haves in the classroom, but we're really, the district does cover what the children need. So I guess just something to consider, moving forward.
Other thoughts? Okay. Yes.
I was just going to say, we tackled this question in our meeting. And something to think about too is there may be enough of those basic supplies, the pencils, the crayons, et cetera, for the classroom, but I consider those also consumables, and they get broken, they get lost, they get eaten. There are a lot of things that happen with those supplies, and so I don't want any parent to stress if they're unable to provide the supplies on the list, but it certainly helps the classroom to make sure that they have enough supplies to carry throughout the year as well. I know a lot of times I send in just an extra package of Ticonderoga pencils in March, just because I figure by now they're all down to stubs or broken on the floor. So to be thinking of that the supplies that are provided by the district can be consumables, can be used up quickly, and to have those extras on hand is helpful to the classroom.
I would say I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that there's no question that teachers are using the materials and asking for things that are helpful in all these different ways. And I think that it's also important to acknowledge that teaching is not an inexpensive profession, and there will always be things that, out of preference, even in a perfectly supplied district, teachers will purchase because they know it will be that little bit better that they could do for their students. But if the crayons are getting broken and the pencils are getting chewed on and so forth, we need to have enough money mid-year to keep those supplied. And I just wanted to make sure that that's happening. Yeah.
Hello. On page 8, under the Reeds Ferry School budget, are you able to speak on the over $1,000 increase in funding under the health supplies?
Yes, thank you for asking. That's a great question. One of our focuses this year well, every year is on safety. And one of the things that we were focusing on the health supply is every classroom at all the schools have an orange backpack. And in that orange backpack are all the supplies for an emergency. So in there are some water bottles, there's paper, there's cards, there's Band-Aids. Every time we have a fire drill or any type of drill, those backpacks go with the teacher to wherever they need to be. And they've gotten old. Some of our backpacks are disintegrating, so we need to replace the backpacks and update the materials within the backpacks. So that's what we're focusing on to make sure that we're ready for it all.
And that increase is at all 3 elementary schools. We all have the same increase for that as well.
Thank you. And then one other question, under the MES one, on page 5, under the police detail, that has also gone up a high amount. Are you able to speak to that?
Yes. So along the lines of safety, what we have done is added police detail to any evening event where we have our entire school present. So when there's a number of students and families, we have all, and this is true across the 3 of us, have added police detail to those. So our open house night, we have an art night, and then we have, what's the other one? We have 3 evening events that have all 3 kids. Open house, our ice cream social. So anything that has a large number of parents, we've added police detail.
Could you speak a little bit to what that means? As in, what expenses are ours to bear? What expenses are part of community policing? What does it mean to ask for a police detail for an event?
So for those events, that means we have police they're in the building. They're walking out in the parking lot for Thornton's and Reed's. They have not great parking. So the police detail also helps with parking, but they're present walking in and out of the buildings. And we have people there for the designated amount of time. I do think it's important to know that our police department is really amazing and does stop by the schools regularly. They're there usually the first day of school. They will visit at other times. They'll bring the dog through. So the kids get really used to seeing the police officers and as part of the building. So they work really well with us, but this is a specific for them to be in the building and outside of the building during that set time.
If I could just chime in a little bit, if you wouldn't mind. Michelle? Please? Okay. Yeah, to be quite honest with you, this is something we discussed, and I think it was the idea and the thought process of central office that for safety and security in the world we live in today, if you're going to have a lot of parents, or a couple hundred parents, it just used to be for like traffic control, but it's not about traffic control. You notice when we have voting, there's probably more parents in JMU's when you're doing an event for the evening than there are voting people, and there's probably 3 or 4 police officers there. And what it means as far as costs go, it's around $75 an hour for a 3-hour minimum for one police officer. But it's worth it because the parents like to see that. The kids like to see that. I heard a story about one of the police officers, I forget which school it was, actually playing basketball with some of the kids. And that was really kind of cool. So it's building community policing, and it's, it gives parents in the community a sense of security that we're taking what we do seriously enough to have those people on site.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else? Gina?
No, I just wanted to add to that. If anyone's ever been to the Thornton Ferry Craft Fair, there is a police presence there. It's necessary, and again, not to just be nice and direct traffic, but we don't have the greatest traffic and parking situations at some of our schools, and it can be dangerous because you have parents trying to cross, you have people, all trying to get to the same place at once. So it does represent a safety issue, and it's good to see them there. It's good to see their presence there. Like I said, the kids love it. It makes me feel safer as a parent. I mean, even just having the crossing guard there in the morning, I think helps a lot for for the traffic flow and for my sanity. So it definitely is a line item that has gone up, and I saw that on JMU's too. And I know it's for specific events, and I know it's for the best of the community. And like you said, I mean, the police officers come in and read to the kids. They bring Mac in, the little dog, so he's not so little anymore, but they do a great deal for us. But this really is a necessary cost because you have so many people in one small space, all coming to do the exact same thing. So thank you. Thank you for thinking of our children's safety.
I just want to caveat a little bit what Gina said. The police officer detail at the craft fair is not funded by the school budget. That is funded by the craft fair committee itself. I don't want anybody in the community to be upset.
Sorry.
Anything else? Yeah.
I'll just say we're being very lighthearted and very positive about the community connection and a police officer being there. But I also think from a safety perspective, if anything were ever to occur, I feel more comfortable with having an officer there than not having an officer. And so if it's a few $100s or a couple $1,000s, I think it's absolutely worth it for the safety of our students and our families.
Okay, my question is on page 13 for reads. And I think some of the additions are referencing what I think Jen was talking about before in terms of the new furniture ads. But can you speak a little bit more to the need for an additional PE teacher and this furniture? And the second to that is, do you see that expanding to all unified arts area? Or is it just the PE teacher that's an extra PE teacher that's needed?
So at this time, based on our enrollment and our anticipated enrollment and the number of classes, the need to have an additional unified arts, as Thornton's had done this year, is necessary in order to make sure all students have their unified arts. So it would be only for PE for this coming year, which then in correlation with 2 PE teachers, we have looked into furniture, sound limiting, not sound eliminating, but limiting, so that 2 PE classes can go on at the same time.
And so if the need for 2 PE classes is there, how come that doesn't expand out to other unified arts classes? Is it based on?
Based on needs and enrollment and number of classes and number of students, we have a schedule of how many of classrooms who get the unified arts on a weekly basis. One of the things that we had talked about, it actually first stemmed at Thornton's. It was a discussion of what would be the most beneficial UA initially. All UAs are important, so I don't mean to say that that's not true, but the need for extra movement, and that's one of the reasons why the focus was on PE. We don't need then an additional art teacher, because then we would have too many unified arts, if I'm answering your question correctly.
I think so, and definitely like because my mind did go to extra movement, extra PE.
And that's the reason why we selected PE over an additional art or additional music teacher.
Okay, so it wasn't based on a teacher-student ratio that drove that need. It was just additional need for additional
exactly
movement for the kids. And okay, I think I understand.
And also within scheduling. It
Okay.
definitely had to do with a schedule and the need of an additional person. And then the discussion was what unified arts would best benefit kids for the need of the lower elementary, and the research out about the need for additional movement for students. And so that's why we selected PE.
Okay.
And can I just add, from a curriculum standpoint, physical education and health are 2 separate curriculums, and we follow not just the New Hampshire state standards, which are from 2003. That seems like a long time ago. But we also follow the SHAPE standards, and the SHAPE standards have separated physical education and health. So they actually have double the amount of curriculum to teach. And so that also went into that conversation about, how can we best meet all of these curricular needs with the amount of staff that we have. So just to add that.
Thank you. And so with that, I guess maybe broader question would be, does the need for an additional PE teacher at MES then need to be considered this year, or is that something that would be expected next year?
So because we have less classes total, we have less blocks of unified arts that are taken up by the classrooms. So our PE teacher currently can do, not all, but some if he needed to go. I mean, he can do all of the classes we have right now with PE. And he does integrate the health into the PE classes currently. So right now we have enough staff to do all of our UAs because of our lower number of classes.
Okay, thank you all.
I'm actually going to follow up on that a little bit because I think I understand what you're saying, but I think I also understand what you were asking, and maybe it didn't quite get to it. See if this is right what I'm saying. If we need another PE teacher, then wouldn't we need one more each of the other unified arts? Do you see what is that? Yeah.
So I think as Michelle was saying, when we look at our instructional calendar and blocks of time at Thornton's and at Reed's, we have more classes at each grade level. So in order to maximize, scheduling is, an art in itself, and how to balance the number of staff that we have with the number of students and classes that we want to provide our unified arts for. So in the mixture and when we were planning, all we needed was one additional person. And from what Amy had said, one of the reasons that the PE person was selected versus an art or a music was because of the movement and also that health. So that was the reason for selecting PE. We don't need an additional music teacher and then an additional art, because then we would have too many blocks and not enough students to fill those blocks.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Please.
Sorry about that.
No, so I think this drives it. So when we talk, so I separating PE and health can understand that part. Thinking from the scheduling standpoint, is PE offered either year-round or longer than the other unified arts, and so that also drives an additional need? Or is it solely based on that curriculum of PE health? MES can handle that with one staff member.
So all of our students and every classroom have PE at least once a week. So in order to then add health or additional classes, we needed an additional staff member in order to cover those classes. So right now, our one PE teacher could not also teach an additional class of health. It would be instead of the physical education.
I think it started. Well, and it started, I mean, Brooke, and you can weigh in. So Thornton's was the first classroom, the first school where there were more classrooms than unified arts for each child to receive the unified arts each week or each 6 days or so. So if they have music, art, PE, and computers, Thornton's they had more classes than they could fit into the rotation for their unified arts. So in order to do that last year, we had to look at what would make the most sense to add the unified arts teacher. And at that point, we just were saying a unified arts person. Then we had to decide, okay, what does that mean? So that the classes will get an additional PE at Thornton's and in Reed's than at MES. So at MES, they get them every 5 days. It might be very similar, maybe more, but probably pretty close, because it only takes us, the unified arts teachers we have, to get through all of our classrooms once. Where with Reed's and Thornton's, it takes a little bit more than that until they added the extra person to get through all their unified arts once. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. So, Michelle, go.
Okay. I'm going to try and say this as it may come out negative, and that's not what the point I'm trying to come across here, but we can use Thornton's as an example. And again, full disclosure, I am a Thornton's Ferry parent, right? But last year we sat here and we talked about the addition of that UA new teacher. And then again, we drilled down that it was going to be PE. Then we get to the new school year, right? And we get into October and realize that the parents are starting to realize that we have third graders that are not going to library. Brooke's like, she knows what I'm doing, right? And now the fourth grade, so third grade does not go to library this year. I will caveat that in a second. And then the fourth graders are doing computers, or they're doing library and they're not doing computers, right? So now you've got two other things that are being swapped off for the year. So my third graders will do computers next year and they won't do library, and vice versa, right? So I guess there are a lot of parents like me that didn't understand that concept. And it's been explained a couple of times, and I'm still not understanding. And the school has done a really good job of trying to get the third graders to the library, but they get 15 minutes, every 2 weeks or what have you, right, to go in to pick a book, because they don't have a structured time to go to library, right? So I find that I get it, but it seems like we have a hole somewhere now between, and again, I don't know in Reed's or Mastrocola, but in Thornton's, I feel like we still have a hole in that school from the standpoint that there's not enough time for the librarian and there's not enough time to the person that's dealing with the computers and stuff, because now we've totally omitted a grade level, right, to make sure that rotation is happening.
And then the third graders are going to PE twice a week.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I see that you're going to, let me pop one more thing in there. I see you're ready to go, but so it sounds to me like partly what merging with what was said before is, and you'll probably answer this, is how to manage to balance the overall number of unified slots and the distribution of them as equal. And those aren't the same thing, but they're related to each other. Is that the space that we're in now? Okay, thank you.
So to give examples to this for the visual people. So for example, we have 6 kindergarten classrooms, but we had 5 unified arts teachers. So that would have left one classroom without a UA for a day and a teacher without a planning period. So they go on a 6-day rotation schedule. So our kiddos might not have gym twice a week, but something else to consider. So we did gain a PE teacher, but we also lost a computer teacher last year. So we really didn't gain an additional UA. We're just trying to figure out how to provide the same number of UAs and have the experience of all of those, like still have computer, still have library, in the rotation schedules that we have. So and Michelle, we've talked about this too, and I think we'll try to figure that piece out, but really the extra PE is because otherwise a classroom would not have PE for a week. They would have to wait for the week after because there wouldn't be that extra UA spot because there would only be 5 UAs but 6 classrooms, if that makes sense.
I'm also happy to speak to the question about why computers and why library. So what having the extra UA teacher would do would be allow us to reconsider those. So the position of library media specialist, in addition to being a UA teacher, also is responsible for managing the library. So all of the purchasing of the books, all of the materials and things that are going in and out of the library, subscriptions and all of that. Our digital learning specialists, in addition to teaching unified arts, are also responsible for the integration of technology into classrooms. So by not having them in every single UA, there's time for them to do the librarian to manage the library and for the DLS to be in classrooms and helping support. Because we have, again, smaller classes. So if we have 4 classes in a particular grade level, one of the UAs doesn't have a class in that one block. So my librarian can manage the library during those times, and my DLS can do the integration and work with the teachers during that time. But because of they really have a dual role. Some of it is teaching students directly, but some of it is also supporting teachers. So that's what some of that time, why they're not in every single class, because there's just not time in this number of slots for them to do both.
That I understand that. Right. And to be honest, when I looked at the budget, I was surprised that I didn't see, especially in Thornton's, looking for an additional teacher because of the loss, but the gain, right? So we kind of just, we really level set and we stayed the same. But I still see this as a fundamental hole in the process, right? Or there's still, I agree, you've got the librarian, the library specialist, I apologize if I'm using the wrong word there, and the computer, they're doing dual roles, right? They're helping the school and they're teaching students, right? So do we take a step back and say, okay, then we need somebody else to fill, there's got to be another half a person to help on either side because we have complete grades that are missing something in that year, right? I mean, you go, the big core fundamentals that we talk to our kids is reading, right? Make sure you read with your child every 20 minutes a day, and we're reading at school, and we're having reading buddies, and we're doing all that. And but we're going to press the brakes in third grade because unfortunately we don't have the time allotted to you to go to library, right? So, and like I said, I give Thornton's a lot of credit that they got a lot of pushback on this. There was a lot of very unhappy parents about this, and they did their best to say, listen, we can't do it now, but we will at least get them to the library, right? At least get them in for that 15 minutes or whatever, so they can still feel like they can go and check out a book and bring it home and read it with their families and stuff like that. But I still see it's still a problem, right? Because next year we're just gonna do the same thing, and where it's gonna be, how are we gonna, we can't spend 15 minutes at computers, right? It's not as easy as going in and out to library or what have you. So how do we not see this as something that we need to add, or somebody that needs to be added into that whole process?
I'm going to step in with a thought, and I might ask our school board representative on this one as well. It sounds to me like we have here a question of the ways that unified arts are structured, which is something a little different than funding the currently in use structure. Is this something that's on the radar in terms of how it's working, how it's not, and so forth?
To my knowledge, we haven't discussed it recently, so it is now.
Could it be also that we're asking, why aren't we funding an additional, half a, part-time or something? Or like you said, I mean, the library was what I was going to bring up, and Thornton's has been very responsive and very, willing to listen and to work with us. I would rather personally see a kindergartner or my first grader get 20 minutes, 15 minutes every other week than my third grader not get library or only get that. So I'm wondering also, and we talked about this, we talked about the library during our meeting, why, my children are having PE twice a week. And don't get me wrong, they love PE, but they're not doing library. So I guess it could also be a funding question of why are we not funding a portion of that? Or I don't know, maybe it comes under the library. I've never been in the library section of the budget, but why are we not funding something to alleviate that hole?
So if I understand correctly, it's not a problem with the amount of staff. It's a problem with the amount of time in the schedule. Is that correct? That it really comes down to the blocks that are available and the rotations and how you sort of plan that out, as opposed to needing a person or a staff member?
So it comes down to the number of classes at each grade level. So for instance, right now, we have 7 kindergarten classrooms, and we have worked really hard to provide them with 7 different UA experiences. The 5 traditional ones, but if not, two classrooms wouldn't have a UA for planning time per their contract. So we've been creative what we're hoping with a new PE teacher, because projected we're going to have 6 kindergarten next year and 7 first grade, and then 5 second and 5 third and 4 fourth, to be able to provide the UAs. I think what you've brought up is something that I think we really need to look at and brainstorm, and something we will absolutely address. And I believe there's a solution that we could come up with. We're pretty creative, so it's something that we had made a decision on for this year. And now that we're hearing the feedback, which is wonderful feedback, it's something we will absolutely address.
Yeah, I just think that I appreciate that. Thank you. And like I said, Thornton's has done a really good job at trying to, but you've got history already. You've got what happened at Thornton's this year by the very virtue of them asking for or getting another UA teacher. So I think it's something that we need to, that needs to be considered, if not this year, in subsequent years or what have you, that maybe it is a funding thing that needs to be looked at, and so that all children get all of the UA activities, regardless of the rotation, but that they get it in every year that they're at the school.
I think giving some time to really look at the issue and then finding out where that hole is as well.
And what's really nice about this is we're essentially saying, why don't you want more? Which is a tricky question to answer when the main reason you come here is to try to change as little as possible while getting what you need, and then we throw that at you. But I think that from what we're hearing, it's certainly I would suggest that you and the board, take a look at the structures and see if there's anything that we at the budget level should be doing to better support that. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
So I just want to ask, because maybe I might be understanding this a little bit better now. In a perfect world, let's take the 7 classroom examples. You have the 5 core PE, the 5 core unified arts. If you had a half a person, 2 separate half-time positions that could fill 2 additional unified arts classes, that would alleviate your problem. Kids wouldn't do double PE, but they could get 7 different things. But right now, the choice is to do 2 PEs. You guys will repeat one for number 7. Thornton's will just do 2 PEs to handle 6 classes. Is that the gist?
And yes,
Okay.
I think that you hit that one, because we also want to be consistent on what we're offering students. If a child is having PE, whether it be once or twice, it's PE versus an absolute different experience that maybe the other 2 schools students don't have. So we do work really hard to be consistent.
Yep, and I totally appreciate that and understand that. I guess one thing, again, I would say just in your brainstorming, maybe think about when I was a child, unified arts, the computers were just going around on a bus. So even if you had half-time, folks to fill those, they could still travel between schools maybe so that the offerings were the same. But again, maybe there's some creative space there if there is a need. Thanks.
Great. Is there any other topic? Any other thoughts? Chuck?
There's been a great deal of discussion about something that is not yet clear how it's going to be adjudicated to the satisfaction of the parents and the community. We're putting together a budget for this year, and we need the security of your communication being clear to us what the desired outcome should be relative to the resources that we might like to apply. So I'm curious when you might be getting back to the budget committee with a clear alternative to the present situation and what it would include relative to resources necessary. I don't think that's an unreasonable request, but I'd like to hear some deadline for us to receive that information. It's critical for us to make a decision so that we don't lose another year.
So I would suggest we have a working session, and that if it's possible to have some movement on it by then, it would be helpful to us in making decisions. That's the, one moment. February 6th. That sound? Would that begin to meet the purpose?
That's entirely at the discretion of. Thank you. It's entirely at the discretion of the administrators of both the Budget Committee and the school district.
I think February 6th is a reasonable time. It'll give us time to work through this and get back to you, of course.
Thank you. Unless you have anything else to tell or ask us, thank you very much for your time and being here this evening. It's appreciated, as well as is all your work.
Thank you.
Safe driving home.
Now, next up, we have Mastrocola Upper Elementary. Welcome. Thank you for being here. If you could introduce yourselves and give a little bit of a sense of the budget priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Nikki Rowe, and I'm the principal of the Upper Elementary. And this is Megan Fowler, the assistant principal of the Upper Elementary. We had a joyful meeting with Michelle. We really had an opportunity to go over many thoughtful questions that she provided us with, many similar questions that you've already answered. We do take time when we start to create our budgets. We work with the elementary very closely. We sit down together because we know that having that feeling of transition for this incredible transition for 4th to 5th is important. And making sure that, continuous instruction is provided and that we're sharing the same messages and that we have the same goals. So a lot of what you asked, police detail, wit and wisdom, those things, as I think a couple of you have mentioned, are very similar. We have a rise in our budget. We have a rise in our budget in science. So we talked about similar things. Like we discussed previously, wit and wisdom is a large part of our budget this year. It will provide us with everything that we need to teach our students. We are so very fortunate because we have been able to pilot the program this year. And so we have had the opportunity to watch the rollout, to see the response of our students, which has been fantastic. We've been able to look at the materials, which are they're incredible. And there are so many materials. So when you see this line item and you think, wow, that's so much money, and then you get these pallets of books, you understand. The first time a shipment came in, we were like, wow, did they give us double? No, they gave us exactly what we needed, but there's quite a bit that comes with the kit. So it's that first year expense. Next year, what we'll be spending money on for the classes that have already started will be the consumable workbooks for students and then any digital licensing. But the cost is significantly lower. So when you see that, I think it's very important for our citizens to understand when you see that large cost, it is not reoccurring. We're going to be able to take care of those books and hopefully have them for years to come. Co-curriculars, they are super exciting. We have 10 this winter from Intro to Color Guard. The Color Guard coach is a member of our school district and our school faculty. So we have Intro to Color Guard. We have jewelry making, French and Spanish, American Sign Language, just a wide variety of things that children can sign up for. So we're excited to bring those back to JMUS. A lot of success last year. Other things that we're looking into when we think about what are our priorities, of course, our science and social studies. You heard the elementaries talk about the newest standards that we're using. And so there is a realignment in both science and social studies, and some consumables are needed. Someone here mentioned Mystery Science. Was it you, Gina? Yeah. And Mystery Science is a fantastic program we have up to 5th grade. And so our challenge for this year has been figuring out what comes next for 6th grade so that they have that same kind of hands-on kit experience to then bring them up to the 7th grade when they'll start working on those science content areas more specifically. So we have a couple new areas. One of them is like waves and energy. And so we're looking into what are the best kits. And that is a large expense to outfit our classrooms with that. So that will be something new when you look at our budget and you look at science, you'll say, whoa, what's going on there? That's what's going on. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle because, like I said, we had a wonderful conversation and we were able to provide her with our answers to some of her really important questions.
Because I haven't talked enough tonight, right?
You know you're good at it, so you might as well.
Again, I want to thank you both for your time yesterday afternoon. It was, a great conversation that we had, talking about a variety of things, and so thank you. I think it's important for the community to know that basically one of the first questions I asked both of these ladies is, this is great, the budget is great. However, what is in this budget that you would love to see in this budget? Or what do you want money for that you haven't asked for, or feel that you can tweak other things to get it without coming out and asking for it right? Because I think most of us know in the community that some of these things are going to be an uphill battle this year based on tax bills and those type things, right? And the both of them pretty much in tandem said, no, we have what we need. And so I think it's very important that the community knows that not only are they teaching our kids and being a part of that, right, but they're also being fiscally responsible with what they have and the money that they are given, right? They're not just willy-nilly about it. They're not, going off and thinking, well, we've got all this money and we're going to do X, Y, and Z, even though that's what it wasn't appropriated for, that they're consciously considering if they're going out and buying new things and stuff, how it impacts the kiddos at large. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring up from this meeting, and Dr. Rowe, I'm going to have you explain because you're going to be able to do this a lot better than I. If you wouldn't mind explaining the 2 new positions and why you need those, that would be number 1.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do that. So thank you. In last year's budget, there was a reading interventionist in each of the elementary schools. We wanted to add that in at the upper elementary school, but we didn't have any data as to how it was working, and it was a large ask because we know that we need to start young and work our way up. And so we pulled it from the budget with the anticipating that we would put it in this year. We have seen the success at the elementary grades. The reading intervention specialist is able to work with children who have not quite yet met standard, but might not be eligible for special ed or might just be on the cusp of like Title I. So what we find in reading, because we do have wonderful diagnostic assessments, is that sometimes there's just an area that needs some remediation. And if you're able to address the area, then you can, in an intensive way, you can move that child forward. And that's what's happening now at the elementary. And so we are now asking for a reading interventionist because we have the same need at our grade level. And so that's the first one. The second is extraordinarily important to us. It is an SEL specialist. The SEL specialist that we have now is absolutely amazing. She is able to really address tier 1 concerns with students. She is able to do some teaching around that. She is very good at addressing like tier 3 situations if there is a child who's in crisis. Tier 2 cannot be addressed as well because it's intensive and it takes time. Tier 2 is where we're lacking some support, and that's where a lot of the teaching happens. So tier 1 can be some pre-teaching and send a child on the way. Tier 3, usually Meg and I become involved, and so it's a team approach. But Tier 2 helps children who have struggled, have a lagging skill in a particular area that needs more time. You know, a child might have a difficult time understanding how to collaborate with their peers, or, you know, to share, or to work through a really intense game of, you know, soccer. And so Tier 2, support is highly needed, but it takes time. And so what we'd like to do is to increase the opportunity to have that person there so the two can work in tandem to address the needs of all of our students, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. I think it was really important when we presented to the school board. Jenna had mentioned something else that we always notice. Having this person allows education to continue for all. So if a student is having a bad day and they need some support, an SEL specialist can remove them from the classroom, allow the teacher that time to continue on with the class rather than addressing the need, and then work with that child individually to get that child to where they're regulated to go back into the classroom. And that is a wonderful thing for teachers. It's a wonderful thing for a student who's in crisis. And mostly it's a wonderful thing for our general population of students because less teaching is lost. And so that's something that we're really hoping that we'll be able to do this year. It's something that we think will benefit our community in such wonderful ways. Anything that, okay?
Thank you. I knew you were going to explain that much better than I was going to. Another thing that we talked about yesterday, and people are going to not be thrilled that I seem to be wanting to spend more money, but we spend a lot of time, as we should, talking about special education, right? And kiddos that need the additional help and assistance and those type things. And then you've got your population, your general population that just, right? They get teachers and those type things. But there is another subset of that. There are kiddos out there that are classified as gifted and talented based on scores and those type things. And it's not something that we typically readily talk about. We're talking anywhere, the average is between 2 and 5% of a school population in this type program. And right now, the way it is done is there are, at the upper elementary, they share the gifted and talented teacher with MES, which is Thornton's Ferry and Reed's Ferry share their gifted and talented teacher as well. So they go back and forth. So you've got half a teacher, again, per school. And they do a great job with that. They do a great job with that where they adjust their time based on the number of kids in the school, what their needs are and what they're doing and the curriculum and those type things. But if you look at the budget, I just looked at the upper elementary and Mastrocola Elementary, and it's $2,400 for that teacher to combined is what they're looking for the year. And I asked, is that enough? Right? Is that enough for what we're trying to do with these other kiddos that need a little bit extra? They're extra from the standpoint they need a little bit more to, for their minds and things like that. And of course, these two said that that's enough. And Mrs. Fowler can speak to this, having been a part of this. But I think it's important that that's out there as well, that we're making sure that there's enough money for those students as well. And anybody that watches the tapes from last year, I had that same question when it came to a bunch of enrichments and those type things, right? If you've got 20 kids in one school and you've got 10 in another, are we allocating the funds, enough or accurately between those 30 kids? Or does one school get less because they have more kids and vice versa? So do you want, I know I've kind of rambled a little bit, but,
I think you did a great job. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was that, at least from my experience as a former gifted and talented teacher prior to becoming an administrator, was I often viewed my population of students between the two buildings as my class. So a lot of times the materials that I would use would be things that I could use with both the younger students and older students. And so for me, for the needs that my students had, it was absolutely exactly what I needed. I would be able to purchase consumables for things like STEM activities, but the program changes so much depending on the needs of the group and the interests of the group. So there might be a year that students are particularly interested in coding. So I might allocate those funds toward purchasing a robot and maybe a digital license for some kind of programming experience for them. But based on that 2 to 5%, that amount of funding was perfect.
And again, like we talked about yesterday, this may be not the year that it needs funding or needs any additional, but I still think that it's something that may be overlooked in the budget in the coming years, and that maybe that is something, that we need to take attention to as a line item that we may not have necessarily focused in on previously. So.
And there's another wonderful area of overlap. One of the things that I'm really enjoying about this year is that we have greater interplay between the board, this committee, and the schools. And that's just another place to kind of tag it and say, hey, is the Gifted and Talented program one that matches the policies and the desires of the board? And if so, how do we support it? And so I really like it when those types of things happen. Yeah.
And I promise eventually I'll stop talking. And this, Amy, if you wouldn't mind coming up this came up in our discussions yesterday. Sorry, Amy, up and down, up and down. We're trying to give you some exercise, not up and down. Can you just explain a little bit the Wit and Wisdom, how the teachers, how are they going to be trained on this, and where is that, in the budget or what have you? Is it allocated to the individual schools? Is that something that you take on in your budget, and how does that happen?
Yeah, the professional development itself, Dr. Rowe could actually speak to that, just because she has 4 teachers in our building right now, as she mentioned, is doing a year-long pilot. We have some other teachers and other grade levels that are willing to do a module or 2. But as far as professional development, that will come out of a district line. So we have, if we end up moving forward with that and their support, both at the budget committee, I think the board has, or the school board has certainly supported it. And then if the community votes to approve the operating budget, we would move forward with a plan to provide at least 3 full days of professional development to the teachers based on our calendar. But then they also have opportunities to meet with their own specific professional learning person from Great Minds. Great Minds is the publishing company that publishes Wit and Wisdom. And they can meet during their professional learning team meetings. They could do before school or after school, but they have a prescribed launch is what they call it. So you're looking at how do you introduce the materials to students, what does your first module look like versus your 10th module, unpacking all of the materials, because as Dr. Rowe noted, there's a huge amount of materials that come initially. So we'll be looking for help like those at Foundations. I think that was Heather Robitaille came and unloaded all of it, all of the magnetic boards. So it's like a similar approach. But yes, there is the professional development will come out of a district line. And then we will make sure that our calendar supports that work.
Thanks.
Sure.
That is it.
I just had a quick question. So supplies versus texts. So is this the same as with the elementary schools where the supplies, they were given that 15% increase from Matt, and then the text is where we're really talking about, those additional thousands of dollars, and those are for the new programs and the material that you'll need for that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a similar question. And I realize this is tricky and doesn't necessarily have to be answered in very granular detail, but nonetheless, the various supply lines and other lines that increase by a certain percentage over time and those pieces, I think it would be beneficial to have a stronger sense of where those numbers come from. As in, is it that they've worked in the past and there's a certain percentage expected over that because they've worked in the past? Is it based on particular lines and particular prices? Just where does that come from as a general rule?
Sure.
Thank you for asking that, Naomi. I want to offer to you what we presented to the school board, and we look at various forms of data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Federal Reserve Board, which has excellent data that we use to benchmark certain appropriation requests. We have for educational supplies and materials. We have it for institutional furnishings. We have it for cleaning supplies. We have it for transportation and other commodities that we consume and use in the development of the budget. So we try not to pick numbers out of thin air. We try to base it on quantitative data, reliable and valid data from valid sources. It's like our enrollment projections. So we don't pick numbers out of thin air. We do a 7-year average of the cohort survival. We call it cohort progression analysis. What is the trend from birth to kindergarten enrollment and then from kindergarten to grade 1? Those two are always very variable. And then we look at what the cohort progression ratio is from subsequent grades, so that we try to base our appropriations on as much data and useful data as possible, and we don't use guesswork. We ask the questions that we need to ask. We have the conversations that we need to have with people. And I hope, I'll get away from the microphone so Nikki and Meg can continue. I hope from your conversations tonight, you are seeing that this is a school district that's on the move. And it's on the move in the right direction. And we're very proud of that. And no is not in our vocabulary when it comes to having conversations and understanding the needs of children. We may not be able to budget for everything, but we want to make sure that we understand where children are right now, what are the current and what are the emerging needs. And I could ramble for another half hour, so you better have me sit down. But I think you see that we're headed in the right direction in this district. And if you like that data, if you like those graphs, because graphs, we're all visual in nature, much more illustrative than tabular data. We'll send those to you before the end of the week.
That would be wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes.
And so I can also provide a picture of what, so not too granular, but an idea of what we do and how we come to that. I'm looking at the proposal from my literacy specialist. And so when I look at the English language arts accounts, she has itemized for me the types of things that we use. Teachers need chart paper. Every teacher needs chart paper. They need chart paper for their morning meetings, their writings, their pulling, any time that they're presenting to students. They need Post-it notes because students use that when they're thinking and writing down their ideas. They need journals to capture their thinking, writing about reading. And so we look at what we've spent in the past, how things grow, and how we can afford to get exactly what we need in the future. So we have a pretty good idea. Our expenditures in supplies don't change that much when you're looking at reading and math because they need the tools that they have consistently used. And so we have an idea about those tools, and then we watch how the prices rise. And we make decisions based on that trying to always be careful that teachers have those things because they're the things that are essential.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
I just have one question in regard to the like the activities after school. How many of your kids actually attend those, and what do the expenses pay for in those, and how do you actually come up with the ideas for those activities?
Okay, so a couple questions. So I want to make sure that I answer them all. We had approximately 150 students participate in our previous co-curricular activities. The money is allocated for in two ways. One, to pay the teacher for their time, and so it is a stipend that they get for providing the co-curricular activity, and then they get money for supplies. And so those are the two. There are two line items there, and so that you can see the one that's around $5,000 is the one for to pay the teachers. The other one is to provide students with whatever they need. One of the wonderful things about that is that some of the teams don't need things. Our American Sign Language group doesn't usually spend $100 because so much of their work is working in teams and actually using their bodies to learn how to sign rather than writing in a book. And so their supply cost is low, as opposed to like jewelry making, where they're buying all different types of beads and Fimo and those types of things. So that's what we're spending the money on. We encourage our teachers to bring their love of whatever activity they do to the students. I think that's one of the reasons why the co-curriculars are so successful, because teachers are doing what they love. And so we ask them, co-curricular activities are starting up again. We do one in the winter and one in the spring. What are you really excited about teaching kids? And so like the coach of the color guard said, what do you think about teaching intro to color guard? And that's something that most children never have exposure to. So, and how that it's so wonderful how that can benefit our high school and our high school color guard, which is so enjoyable to watch at the games. We have a teacher who loves to make jewelry. And so she is going to share some of the different types of things that she has done with students so that they can then continue this art and hopefully make it maybe a lifelong hobby. French and Spanish, they do enrichment clubs with the kids. So they do food and culture and games. What other clubs? Help me out. Novel writing. Yes, we have a gentleman in our school who loves to write, and so he wants to share his talent with students to learn how to begin the novel writing process and developing characters. So when we think about all of the things that we're offering to kids, I think the most important thing to understand is it comes from the love of what the teacher wants to share. And I think that's part of why it's inspiring. We have a teacher who loves to go to escape rooms, and so she's doing an escape room session. She herself is an entrepreneur, and so she's doing an entrepreneur club. So you know, it's really about them sharing their love for the different activity, and then what happens sometimes is we get like 100 kids who are like, escape room club. And so then we have to figure out, okay, last year she ended up doing like 3 or 4 of them because we wanted to give a lot of kids that opportunity. So that's where it comes from.
Thank you so much. I also just have one more question, which you may be able to answer, but maybe not. In regards to those students that do actually go to those clubs, it's based on research, and research shows that when kids are more engaged, they tend to do well in their courses. Do you have stats on that? Like, do you track those kids to see, are those, I guess, high achievers? Mm-hmm. Do they tend to do better?
We don't have any data on that. That would be an amazing study. Who needs a dissertation? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
One thing I'd love to add that I think is important to know is I think that the clubs have given a lot of students opportunities to try things that are a little bit outside their comfort zone. We had a student who wanted to try crochet club, who we maybe didn't expect. And so I think that having that chance to to try something different in a setting that's maybe not at home or with a family member, with other kids is a really great opportunity for them. But I do like your idea about gathering some data about that.
I think too, part of your question that we haven't answered yet is that the children come from our general population, all different types of students. We have students who are super into sports who are in the gardening club. So, you know, I don't think that we're taking just like the high achieving students or appealing to high achieving students. We have students across all of the different classrooms and the grade levels. Sure.
It's like Studio 54, trying to get into Studio 54, some of these after school activities when it opens. It's like 2:59, 3 p.m. People are like, bing.
But it's true. It's true.
That's not exciting. I'm excited for her to come and be able to do some of those. It's such a great program. I'm so glad that these schools are doing this.
Yeah, we are too.
So I had a question about the furniture with the replacing 2 tables. And I don't want to go too far into it because in other years, yes, people are laughing already. We've gotten stuck on tables for hours and hours. I just wanted to ask, is there still a furniture replacement plan over time and if it's a part of that?
We're almost done. So we are in a position where, depending on the choices that we're making and the choices in terms of how many of the older tables we're willing to keep, we're in a really good place. So we do have a couple more years of the plan, but as we adjust and as we look closer at the tables that we do have, and we start to figure out, you know, the placement of the tables and all of those wonderful things, we're feeling really good, and we're getting to the end. So the end is in sight.
Excellent, thank you.
That came up yesterday. That's why I was chuckling. And in the budget, they're looking to replace 2 tables, and then they still have 6 more to replace in coming years.
This is probably a Matter Bill question. Is that part of something broader that's still happening? I know occasionally there's been a broader idea of furniture replacements, or is it school specific at the moment?
At the moment, it tends to be school-specific, but that is something we always keep a careful eye on, particularly with respect to adaptive type of furnishings. We're having an increasing number of students who are interested in the stand-up desks, you know, with the sway bars. That have a certain therapeutic nature to them for some students. So that's a very important part of the educational process. And so it's site-specific for the most part, but we're always thinking about it and talking about it in general conversations.
Thank you. Anything else? Go ahead, Jennifer.
I just wanted to say that, you know, Mr. Olson, to your point, the district is going in a very, very good direction under the leadership of the administration, from curriculum to individual school administrators. I really feel like the district is making huge strides for our children, and I'm going to get a little teary about it. But you know, I asked a tough question of the school board a couple of meetings ago about the ROI on the spending. And I very much feel like you all have put in a lot of time and effort to make sure that you are being fiscally conservative, but also providing our students with the learning experiences that they need and also the extracurricular or the well-roundedness that they need. So I just wanted to applaud you all, and I do think we're moving in a great direction. I absolutely wholeheartedly support the reading specialist and the SEL Tier 2 specialist, because I see both of those as needs that have grown out of the COVID years as these students have moved into the grade levels, these upper grade levels. They still need some supports in those areas. And I sort of liken it to when I was a student, we went to a reading class or we went to guidance, like we had opportunities to go get extra support in those areas when we needed it. So again, just want to really applaud the leadership of the district and leadership of, each of the schools and all the hard work that you're doing to move us in the right direction. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well said, Jen. Thank you. Thank you both for presenting.
course.
I'll add on to just the extracurricular. So I know Dr. Rowe said that, the staff members bringing their passions to the table really draws the kids, but it's also the staff members themselves because they make these connections with the students. And it's amazing to see what it does in terms of the students getting excited for the club, but also knowing that they get to see the staff member during the school day. So it's really just it's a well-rounded program. And I'm sure it's the same at the elementary schools as well. But I think it just adds more than what happens after school during that time. So wonderful program. Awesome. I do have a question on page 1 on Project Safeguard. So I know that it came up last year. And I know we're in the midst of planning it now, so we probably don't have updated costs and such. But do you both feel that the added cost? So I know last year it was talked about, and I don't remember the time frame, and I'm sorry because I wasn't in Merrimack during whenever this was a big. More like a field trip almost, it seemed like. So Chuck, I think that you provided some of those details. But do you feel that the extra cost there accounts for all of that? Or should we, consider doing anything else?
Yeah. For this year, absolutely. We feel very confident. We also have the PFA, which helps us fund some of the more expensive speakers. Should we let them in on our secret, Mackenzie? So we've been working with Mackenzie to see if there's a possibility that we can make it a field trip again. And so Mackenzie very graciously hosted us this summer at her school, and we looked at the spaces. And so that is our hope and dream, that we can again make it feel like it's like a very well organized field trip for the students where they get to go off of our campus and onto a college campus and take some of those classes. So last year was awesome. It was just so fun. Were you there? Yeah, you were there. I walked around. I had an opportunity at lunchtime to walk around in the courtyard and talk to parents and ask them, how is it going? What are the things you like? Do you have suggestions? And it was an overwhelmingly positive response from them. So when we were looking at the people that we want to bring in, some people come for free and some people are a little bit more expensive, but all well worth it. And so we have the money to do the program the way that we'd like to do it this year and maybe even enhance it by bringing it to a college campus. So that's one of the things that we're working on. Sarah Parado is also going to be working on Safeguard with us, which is really exciting because she brings that knowledge and the aspect of general wellness, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the project. So it will be exciting to have her work with us.
Thank you. So with the, if we do think about moving it off campus, is there something that, is there a time that we should think about considering maybe adding to that? Do you think you would have details of if there would be added cost for that?
We're working on that right now. Do you want me to talk about what we've talked about so far? So basically what we're working on is we're trying to figure out what does that look like. Is there an opportunity for the college community to donate the space for us? And so those are the pieces that we're trying to buckle down. Like, how is this going to look? How will transportation be impacted? And so that's the pieces we really get started because this is planning time right now.
Yeah, and that's, I know that we're like in the middle of planning this year, but when we try and think forward, just
so
want to
we'll
make
know
sure we
more.
account.
We'll know more, but it's a pretty healthy budget. And so I really think that we're going to be able to do it in the way that we want to, based on what the funds we have.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share for the committee because,
you mentioned it at when they presented to the school board last year. I had said, "What is Project Safeguard?" because I had never heard of it, and then a few short months later, my son was in 6th grade. I actually got the opportunity to attend Project Safeguard as a parent, and was blown away. Like, I really enjoyed the program. I'm not sure my son enjoyed it as much as I did.
We'll work on that.
Which I don't think that says anything about the program. I think it says something about my 6th grader. But and so my comment to them at the school board meeting had been, can we do a little bit more excitement building around that with like the incoming 5th grade parents so that like they know what it is and what it's all about.
So-
somebody who doesn't know, who would like to explain?
So, and based on that, we're adding it to our 4th grade move up night. So in our 4th grade, when our 4th graders come, many of you have probably been to that opportunity where we explain like what our school is, how it's the same, how it's different. And Project Safeguard will be part of that presentation. So Project Safeguard is an opportunity where students and parents come together to learn about being the best citizen that they can be. And so there are presentations on kindness, there are presentations on safety, like a bicycle safety, there are presentations on screen safety, like there's a show Screenagers that is shown. Parents and students either work together and go to sessions together. There are some just for students and there's some just for parents. But basically what you have as a parent is a menu of a wide variety of different courses you can take. And so you can take them with your child, you can take some on your own, your child can take some on your own, and you fill the day with that opportunity of learning how to be safe, but also how to be a contributing citizen. So safe and good. And, as our children grow up and think about ways that they can give back to the community, those types of things are involved in the program too. So wide variety of things to choose from. It'd be awesome if it lasted a week so you could do everything, but you do have to pick and choose the programs that are most interesting to you.
There was a lot of stuff about the transition to middle school too that I found really valuable. Like one of the presentations they gave to the whole assembled student body was about, like being yourself in middle school and not succumbing to peer pressure and bullying and all of that kind of really important stuff. And how it's like okay to be nervous when you're going to a new school with a like totally new structure, and it was valuable information.
Chuck.
Matt? Hi, Matt. You think you might come forward and give a historical representation of a project created right here by one of our staff people, Warren Berry?
Aww.
Yeah, okay. You're talking about Project Safeguard. Boy, Warren started that probably, was it 30 years ago? He's been retired for a number of years. And we used to hold it off-site. It was at St. A's College for a while. It was down in Nashua at the college there. And it got together, boy, I'll tell you, in the Project Safeguard, entire grade levels of kids and their parents together to talk about some difficult issues, some issues that often parents and kids have a difficult time conveying to one another in a non-threatening setting. Had a keynote speaker. It was a wonderful program. Went on for a couple of days. It was really wonderful. And Warren, to his credit, he started and he kicked it off, and he led the charge for probably almost 25 years or so, right? And round, what? 36. Okay. Well, it was a tremendous program, and it helped out a lot of parents and kids to discuss stuff that they normally wouldn't do. And it broke down a lot of barriers, and it was really kind of revolutionary for its time. It was well before its time. So that was the program in Warren Berry.
And it has been replicated across the country.
Yes, it has. Yep, correct.
Any other thoughts, questions, Rachel?
Probably not for Dr. Rowan and Mrs. Fowler, maybe more for Bill and Matt. But you said something, Naomi, on furniture plans and asking about specific schools. I'm not sure if there's been any thought put into some of these plans that have been ongoing and elongated. And I know we had these discussions last year, but there's the surplus of money that was spoken about at one of our first meetings that was retained from the surplus. I don't know if there's been any thought about how that might be allocated, and if that could help maybe, get some of these furniture plans off of a 20-year plan and get things taken care of.
We'll see who gets there first, yeah.
What we try to do is look at our priorities, Rachel, and kind of hold back on the commitment of any of that reserve for any contingencies or any emergencies that might emerge. Now, can we use it for furnishings and other issues? Yes, personally, and I don't want to speak for Matt, but my own personal view is nothing from a furniture perspective has risen to the level at this point in time that is beyond what we can handle in the general fund request that would require us to dip into that reserve. Most of that, from my perspective, is important for any last-minute staffing decisions that we may have to make, any offsets to any reductions that we may have to make. I understand the workings of the default budget, but I'm also concerned about the default budget level in that one should never feel comfortable going to bed at night with the terms adequacy aid and the use of the term adequate in education. We don't have an ability, we have to be great in this profession and not just adequate. And the same thing with the default budget, that every student has 1 year, as we all know, at a particular grade level. And I don't think a default level budget serves a student well. So, more than verbose answer to your question, we will reserve that in the event that we have to make more severe budget reductions at some point in time. And for right now, the furnishing needs, I do believe, are adequately met in the operating budgets. Matt, you know.
Thank you. And maybe you could add on to that. So could you provide, and it could be either of you, if Matt wants to turn out the mic, but maybe provide more context of, so that makes sense to have a priority list, and that would come up for emerging needs. At what point, because I know Matt also made the comment, it's only good for a year and then it gets turned back in and there can be a recalculation.
Okay.
When you bring up the default budget too, though, if you go to a default budget, is it allowed to be used still? Or if,
Sure it is.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We often, for some of us who've been here for a while, it was kind of a running kind of inside joke that we're on year 15 of the 5-year furniture replacement plan because things seem to, you remember that, Naomi, when you were on the board, right? Things seems to have slowed down. But as Bill mentioned, after a good 18 years of putting the default budget as the choice and the only choice for the voters, we're finally giving voters a choice. If they want to vote the budget that we have, we feel it's a more than adequate budget that'll get us from point A to B that's going to move the needle, as opposed to putting forward a default budget for 15, 20 years or however long it's been. You took the choice away from the voters. Now at least we're giving them choice. If they vote no, that's their purview, and we'll deal with the default budget. But if they vote yes, they will be putting forward a budget that we feel is going to move us forward. So that's very important. I'm glad Bill brought that up. But the reserve money, yeah, it lapses at the end of the year, but then it comes back, and then we can reserve up to $3 million if we want to. It's based on a 5% of our net assessment without getting too carried away.
Okay, so it could in theory, carry over. It would just be part of
yeah,
that
yeah.
recalculation.
It's-
Okay,
yeah, it
I didn't
recalculates.
understand that, I think, from the first
It
meeting.
dips back into the pool, and then it can be redone.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought it was use or lose kind of thing.
No,
Got it.
no.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's why I was wondering if there was, at what point you just had to move on it this year, if it was a 1 year. Thank you for that clarification.
I think the distinction is that it can't pile up. Like we can't save it year to year, but we'll always have that amount, like you said.
Any other? Jennifer?
Well, and I would venture to say too that there's an advantage in making small investments over time. If you were to make a large investment in all of the furniture in 1 year, then in 7 years, 10 years, however long that furniture lasts, you're now making a large investment again at that time. Whereas if you're doing it, in smaller pieces, then the lifetime of the items staggers, and you're not making those large investments all at once again. And so I think that makes it easier from a budget perspective to kind of put away a little bit each year toward the replacement of those items. So
I don't disagree, Jen. I think the original plan was 5 years. It will end up being close to 20. If we were talking about technology, our network and technology would not work. Understand furniture is a little more sturdy. But again, I'm just trying to push for things that help the students. And I know we say furniture and we don't really talk about it, but they do make impacts. And whether it's round tables in the cafeteria or some of the needs of furniture that needs to be in the classroom to help students learn, I think those are important pieces to education as well. So I was just trying to make the case, just wanted to get some more clarification and questions. So appreciate everything and all the information.
And I think it's a fair point. I think that in some ways furniture is something, since it breaks, well, it sometimes breaks quickly, but it breaks slowly overall, that can be postponed over and over and over again. And that it's important to pay attention and make sure that we're both doing it bit by bit and also not neglecting to do that bit as we go. Yeah. Anything else? If you have nothing else you want to put out there for us or questions for us, then thank you so much for coming. We
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time and the work that you do every day.
And we
as well.
appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Okay, I believe that we have minutes to approve. Do they need to be done separately or can we bring them to as one? Oh, I just didn't know if it was not permitted to do them together. Okay, so the minutes for November and for December. Are there any suggested amendments to the minutes? Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion? We don't have to discuss minutes, but let's give it anyway. Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes for November and December, please indicate by saying aye and or raising your hand. Got it? Did you count? Okay. Okay. Anybody against? Any abstentions?
Gina's not here.
Thank you very much. She stepped away. Yes. So the next item on our agenda is a policy review. This was a requested item by a member of the committee who is not here tonight. The basic question was to revisit the policy that we created regarding remote attendance, as not allowing remote attendance, but attendance being defined as in person. If there is interest, we can revisit that here, or we can leave it alone without discussion if nobody here feels the need to discuss it.
Do you know the reason of why they wanted it discussed?
I do, but I'm not sure I should represent it for them.
Okay. Should
Yeah.
it be something that we table then until, or is it?
Well, it was put on the agenda. and-
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be re-requested, I think, but
Got it.
yeah, if that seems.
You're either here or you're not.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
There's
That's why I
no
want to. That's why I want
anonymous
to know the thought
posting.
process behind it, just to understand.
There's no anonymous posting in a public committee. That's my feeling.
One can assume that the individual was not happy with the outcome last time in some way. Yeah. Okay. Chuck.
I just want you all to know it wasn't me.
Well, we figured you would have spoken up already, so.
Okay, our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, January 17th, same time, same place. There is a snow date if needed. I'll mention briefly that I sent out the email with a clarification in terms of when cancellations happen. As much as I like that people look to me with the power of cancellation, I think the district has the better knowledge and understanding on that one. And so we're adhering to the district closures in regard to whether or not we meet. I'm going to be on the list, or rather, since I'm not a parent at the moment, I don't tend to get those announcements as they happen, so I'm being added as if I were parents. I can get all of the spam coming in for those pieces, which means that I'll also email the group if I happen to know it, and you may not have seen it online or posted in that way.
Enjoy those 5 a.m. phone calls.
Thank you so much. Are there any comments from the committee?
Did anyone get a chance to watch the school board meeting last night?
I notified Naomi, so she told everyone.
We were watching with bated breath.
So do I need to make my comment, or does everyone know what I'm going to say? We had a presentation from Sean Powers, who is the mastermind behind the scoreboard at the high school. It's very much a passion project for him. He's been doing a lot of research and contacting companies and talking with other districts who have boards like this. It seems like we're still in the kind of like beginning stages of having a plan, but he's ready to start fundraising, and he's really gung-ho about it and hoping to have this be something that we actually do this year as opposed to putting it in next year's budget. The school board did vote to support the project in terms of offering our assistance when he gets the fundraising done. We'll be able to help him with like the site, and similar to how we've done with playground projects in the past, where a community member or a group has come with funding, and we've said, okay, we can support this monetarily in a limited way to like offset some of the, the costs of like preparing the ground and that sort of thing. So the school board is in support of having a new scoreboard at the high school. And we are, the community is, he is going to see if he can organize the community to have it be a fancier scoreboard than the one that is currently there.
And it's important, Naomi didn't say this, but it's not a budget line item. It comes out of a maintenance budget that already exists, and Matt presented that last night. And the only dollar number thrown out from the school budget was around $50,000, but not more. So their hope is to 100% fund it privately. One thing that Sean did not touch on was Laura's World involvement. What they are holding is an account as a pass-through for their fundraising. They are not doing the fundraising for them. That's a whole separate thing from their nonprofit.
So they're utilizing the structure that they have the ability to retain a pass-through account and offering that as a service towards this, as opposed to.
Correct. And their
Okay.
account's already open and ready to go because Sean's goal is to break ground by the spring.
And it really is an exciting project. Like, I would encourage people to reach out to him and talk about it, because there are some really exciting opportunities there if they manage to raise the funds where they could involve all sorts of groups at the high school and not just the sports teams. Like you could get videography people involved doing things on the screen, and there's all kinds of opportunities there.
And it's in the first few minutes of the school board. So if you haven't seen it, you can pull it up. You can tell your friends to go watch it. But there's a lot of work to be done. I think his presentation got pushed ahead a little bit because of the other gentleman speaking. And so he was very cautious about what he said, and he's coming back with a full presentation. But
Thank you. That's very helpful. Okay. Any other member comments? Rachel?
It's not so much a comment, but a question, I guess, for Naomi for the school board. I guess maybe when he brings his presentation forward, I get that he's, he'd be an outside person or organization that's coming forward with it. But one of my thoughts and concerns would be, I know there was talk and there was a number thrown out of a very expensive scoreboard, video just the maintenance of that and what it would do to, the maintenance fund over time. So I don't know if there's, difference, if there
that
would be.
was in his talk last night,
Okay.
that was one of the things he still needed to research out of respect for the school district and the taxpayers in the future. So if you have it, it's about a 12-minute presentation of his.
Yeah, we just had a different meeting. We were at another meeting.
Yeah,
so I didn't get to see that yet.
Yeah,
but
I
I do
watched it
plan
this
on
afternoon.
talking. So that would just be one of my thoughts to that.
The other thing is it was a very it was kind of like an idea session almost, as opposed to this is the logistics of how we are going to do this thing. Because like Ellen said, I do think it ended up getting pushed up a little faster than it would have otherwise. And I unfortunately don't have it on me, but I have like a whole list of notes that I took during the presentation with all those exact kind of questions. Like, what will the long-term maintenance be? How long will it last? What are the replacement costs for like light bulbs and all of that kind of stuff? And we will absolutely go over that before we move ahead with breaking
Right,
ground.
even right down to advertising, like how those funds are taken in, what they're spent on, things like that. Sean is not an amateur at this and at community projects. So again, he did say it was a little not the way he would like to present everything, but here's the idea in the works. This is where they're going. Here's how the group is organized. And this is what we're thinking about. Please contact me if you have any questions, if you think I've forgotten anything, so that I can make the best presentation for the community and make sure all areas are covered. He has a great relationship with Matt, and he has a great relationship with the school district. So he did not want it misrepresented in poor light. And so if you just take the 10 or 15 minutes, whatever it is, to watch that, you'll feel much better.
So it seemed to me when I saw it as well, and not to put too fine a point on it, that he came in order to help it stay on track when conversations were beginning to swirl around it. And so he came before he might have had everything organized precisely the way he would typically present a project.
Correct.
But to make sure that it was well represented. Okay.
Yeah, and that's fine. I guess, some of my thought is just because we might not, I don't know. I know the agenda is always posted for the school board, but again, public participation might not hold the same bearing maybe as, someone, if you're thinking about from the school board committee, but I know that there's a lot of good ideas of money coming in, the video, getting other organizations involved. But if we don't have staff members also to support some of the students working this, how is that going to work also? So it's just a lot to think about. And I get that it's premature, but I think maybe a bigger group, to help vet out some of this, if he doesn't have it already, might be helpful. Just some feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I can tell you that one of the schools in Nashua, I'm not sure which one, but I heard from this group who's planning it, is that they're really trying to speak to them, speak to their school district, speak to the athletic directors, figure out how their board is incorporated, because the reports are that these fancy video boards aren't necessarily used to their full advantage. And so maybe you could scale it back. But part of it wasn't just the videography of it. He's increasing the size of the scoreboard so that it's visible from different areas. And he proposed moving it to a different location as well. So he said that he's been doing his research, and he has 3 or 4 quotes, and he's been working with them, and he's gone to meet with the companies intimately, so he knows how does it work, how hard is it to use, what type of conduit do we need, is it wireless versus not wireless, can we see it? So part of the expense, and a large part of it, is the increasing the size of it. So currently our board is 18 feet wide and it's going to be 20 feet wide. And then they would like to name our stadium and school at the top and add a title board at the top. So there's all different things, but that's one of the things I can definitely guarantee you that the people involved in that are in the organized portion of it have thought about, because they want to make sure they're not spending money on something that's not going to be used or is going to cost the school more money in the long run.
And they've also been working closely with Matt and Tom Tussaud as well. So they've been involved in this process. This isn't like someone who just showed up yesterday and hasn't been talking to the district and all of that. It's on track and it's being planned out.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that Matt left, because Matt was also messaging at the same time I was last week, like, whoa, what's going on? Because I don't really feel the other gentleman was supposed to come forward yet.
So who is heading this? Is it SJ or is it Sean?
It's Sean. It's
Sean who's heading
100%
this.
Sean, in conjunction with the community group and the quarterback club and other sponsors that he's used for other things to accomplish, like the concession stands.
So basically, we only have 50,000 for this, for allotted, and then he's got to come up
No,
with
it's
the-
not been allotted.
So
That
I'm
was
going
just kind of a
to-
random number thrown
Yeah.
out.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to suggest that we're moving beyond comment. We can certainly talk about it more and move it onto the agenda another day, but it sounds to me like what's happened, it's been put back on track, and what we really need to do is pay attention to the issues that are being brought across the board, and no pun intended, and see what happens with that one as we go. Good?
Because they may not even need money, right? Like, that's all up in the air right now.
Any other comments from members? Okay, can we have a motion to adjourn?
Me.
I'll second B.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.